1945. The war was finally over. Cities were liberated, and people rejoiced in the streets. But not everyone was celebrating. For some, the end of the war meant the beginning of their worst nightmare. Thousands of women, accused of collaborating with the enemy, were dragged into the streets. Their heads were shaved. They were paraded in public, insulted, beaten. Some never recovered. But were they really traitors? Or were they just convenient scapegoats? The women shamed. After World War II, betrayal or justice? When the Nazis occupied France, the Netherlands, Belgium, and other parts of Europe, life changed drastically. Men were sent to war, leaving many women alone to survive as best they could. Some fought in the resistance. Some worked hard to protect their families. And some, whether out of necessity, fear, or even love, formed relationships with German soldiers. It wasn't always about betrayal. Some women sought protection, some needed food, and others genuinely fell in love. But when the war ended, none of that mattered. In the aftermath of the war, the streets became the setting for a different kind of battle, one of revenge, rather than justice. In France, nearly 20,000 women were accused of collaboration and publicly humiliated. Their heads were shaved as a mark of disgrace. They were stripped, beaten, and sometimes even killed. Some were forced to march through towns, covered in tar, with swastikas painted on their bodies. But here's what's striking. Most actual war criminals and Nazi sympathizers, businessmen, politicians, and industrialists never faced this kind of treatment. Instead, the anger of the people fell on women, many of whom had never actively helped the Nazis, except through personal relationships. And yet, not all women chose this path. While some women were accused of collaboration, others risked everything to fight. Women like Lucie Aubrac, Nancy Wake, and André de Jong joined the resistance. They smuggled weapons, spied on German movements, and even led military operations. Some were captured, tortured, or executed, but they never gave in. They are remembered as heroes. But does the fact that some women resisted mean others deserved the brutal punishment they received? The public humiliations were not just a spontaneous act of revenge. Newspapers printed photos of shaved women, fueling the shame. Radio broadcasts called for a cleansing of society. It was a way to prove that the country had fought back against the enemy, by punishing those who could not fight back. Some of these women had no trial, no chance to defend themselves. Their crime? Being with a German. Meanwhile, some of the richest and most powerful men who profited from Nazi rule walked free. Today, historians look back at these events with a more critical eye. Some still argue that those who truly collaborated with the enemy deserved punishment. But was public humiliation real justice? Others suggest that many of these women were simply easy targets, punished because true accountability was too difficult. In the end, history remembers both types of women. Those who fought bravely against the enemy, and those who faced the anger of their own people when the war was over. But what do you think? Were these women traitors, or were they victims of a chaotic and vengeful time? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching.
She'll let you fuck her for a chocolate bar. It's not true.
History is filled with legendary warriors, but not all of them were men. Some of the fiercest, most fearless fighters to ever walk the battlefield were women. From queens who led armies to rebels who fought against empires, these 5 warrior women defied expectations and carved their names into history. 1. Boudica, 1st century CE. We begin with Boudica, the warrior queen of the Iceni tribe, who took on the might of the Roman Empire. After the Romans betrayed her family and seized her lands, Boudica led a massive uprising against them in Britain. With an army of over 100,000 warriors, she burned Roman cities to the ground, including Londinium, modern-day London. Though ultimately defeated, she became a symbol of resistance against oppression. 2. Tomoe Gozen, 12th century Japan. A fierce samurai warrior of Japan's Genpei War, Tomoe Gozen was a master of the sword, bow, and horseback combat. Fighting alongside the Minamoto clan, she was known for her incredible skill and fearlessness. In one famous battle, she single-handedly took down multiple enemies and even beheaded a powerful samurai before vanishing from history. Her legacy endures as one of Japan's greatest warrior women. 3. Jeanne Hachette, 15th century France. While Joan of Arc is France's most famous female warrior, another heroine, Jeanne Hachette, played a crucial role in defending her city from invaders. In 1472, the Duke of Burgundy's army attacked Beauvais. When enemy soldiers breached the walls, Jeanne grabbed an axe, earning her the name Hachette, and led a counterattack that pushed them back. Her bravery inspired the city to fight on, securing victory. To this day, Beauvais honors her with an annual festival. Lauzun, 19th century Apache warrior. Lauzun, a legendary warrior and strategist of the Apache people, fought fiercely to defend her homeland from Mexican and U.S. forces. She was not only a skilled fighter, but also a spiritual leader. According to accounts, she had the ability to sense enemies' movements, helping her people evade capture. Fighting alongside her brother, the great Apache leader Victorio, and later Geronimo, she stood defiant against colonization until the very end. 5. Kutulun, 13th century Mongol Empire. The niece of Kublai Khan, Kutulun was a fearsome Mongol warrior who proved her strength both in battle and in sport. She was undefeated in wrestling, and legend says she refused to marry any man who couldn't defeat her in combat, winning over 10,000 horses from her challengers. As a skilled military leader, she rode into battle alongside her father, crushing her enemies with unmatched force. Her story even inspired parts of the famous opera Turandot. These warriors shattered expectations, proving that courage and strength are not bound by gender. From the battlefields of Europe to the plains of Mongolia, their legacies continue to inspire us today. You think the woman in the photo is beautiful? It may not be nice for you, but Nasreddin Shah does not agree with you. But more importantly, are these real photos from Nasreddin Shah's harem? Have you ever seen these photos before? These images, widely shared on social media, are said to depict Nasreddin Shah's harem. But are they real, or are they actually from a theatrical performance? Today, we're diving into 19th century Iran. We'll explore the beauty standards of Qajar women, the identities of the women in these photos, and whether these images are authentic or just myths. Let's get started. Nasreddin Shah ruled Iran during the 19th century and is well known for his extensive harem. But the harem wasn't just a place for wives. It included servants, educators, and even women with political influence. One of the most significant figures in the harem was Anis al-Dawla, the Shah's favorite wife. She wasn't just a spouse, she played an essential role in court politics and social affairs. Are these photos real? Some social media users claim these photos are actually of men dressed as women in Iranian theater, as women were not allowed to perform on stage at the time. However, historical evidence disproves this claim. According to researcher Stacy Gemsheiwiller, these photos genuinely belong to Nasreddin Shah's harem. Some of them are even preserved in Iranian state archives, confirming that they feature the Shah's wives, daughters, and granddaughters. Now, let's discuss something even more fascinating. Qajar beauty standards. To modern eyes, these women's mustaches may seem unusual, but in 19th century Iran, a mustache was considered a symbol of beauty for women. For example, in 1877, traveler Carla Serena visited Iran and described how Princess Ismat al-Dawla did her makeup. She darkened her eyebrows, applied mascara to her lashes, added white powder and red blush to her face, and even drew a thin mustache above her lips. Mustaches were considered a mark of elegance and nobility. But by the early 1900s, this beauty ideal had started to change. Under European influence, Iranian women began removing their mustaches and adopting a more Western appearance. This marked a major shift in how femininity was perceived in Iran. So, to sum up, these viral images are indeed linked to Nasreddin Shah's harem. However, not all of them feature Anis al-Dawla. Some depict his daughters and granddaughters. And no, these women were not men in disguise. Mustaches were simply a beauty trend of their time. It's fascinating to see how beauty standards change over time, isn't it? Today, we're talking about the world's oldest profession. And no, I'm not talking about politicians, though let's be real, there's some overlap. From ancient temples to modern TikTok influencers, the business of pleasure has been thriving for literally thousands of years. And while today, some folks are out here making 6 figures a month selling feet pics, back in the day, these ladies were shaping history. Let's start with one of the OGs, Rahab. This biblical queen of hospitality didn't just welcome strangers, she literally helped spies overthrow a city. Talk about customer service. And get this, she's one of the few working girls who actually got a happy ending. She ditched the life, settled down, and even made it into the Bible. That's a rebrand if I've ever seen one.
Great success.
Next up, Thais. She was a top-tier Greek hetera, which was basically an elite escort, but with philosophy and better wine. She even rolled with Alexander the Great and allegedly convinced him to burn down Persepolis. Imagine being that persuasive. Meanwhile, most of us can't even get a text back. And then we have Madame du Barry, one of King Louis XV's most famous mistresses. This woman went from working-class girl to Versailles VIP, living a life of silk, diamonds, and drama, until the French Revolution happened, and, well, let's just say, the guillotine was not as forgiving as the king. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Back then, courtesans had to study literature, politics, and art to win over kings and emperors. Today, you just need an iPhone, some lighting, and an OnlyFans subscription link in your bio. Like some of these women are making millions a year, buying mansions, funding their retirements, and meanwhile, you're over here debating whether to pay for extra guac at Chipotle. So, what did we learn today? Well, 1, the world's oldest profession is still thriving. 2, history has always been influenced by powerful women who knew how to play the game. And 3, if you ever feel bad about your paycheck, just remember, someone out there is making a fortune selling elbow picks online. This shouldn't upset you. I think there are more important things than money.